Welcome to the 3% Podcast, the bi-weekly podcast from Open Letter and 3%. This is Chad Post from Open Letter. I'm joined as always by Tom Roberge from Riff Raff.
Hello, hello.
And this week we have special guest, Meytal Radzinski, who is the founder of Women in Translation Month. Welcome.
Hi.
You are so famous now for this.
I would not use that phrase, but sure.
I saw that you're on Wikipedia.
It's surprising.
Therefore, if you're on Wikipedia, then you're famous. So how are you doing?
It's exciting every year. What month? It's stressful.
Do you want to talk a bit about the, I'm sure a lot of people who are listening know about this, but do you want to talk a bit about the origins of Women in Translation Month and why you started it, how you started it, and what's progressed since that time?
Sure. So basically, this would have been in 2014. We started Women in Translation Month, and it was kind of originally just a small blogging group with the idea of just having an opportunity to raise the profile for a lot of women writers in translation. Once I had kind of done some statistics, seen using the wonderful 3% translation database, of course. I had seen that kind of imbalance, and then hoping to give people a chance to read more books by women writers in translation and be exposed to new books. And it's just kind of grown ever since. The goal is really just first and foremost awareness.
Yeah. How are you these days? So, how are you? I mean, it seems to have grown outside of just being like something that you've been posting about on your blog. Like, it's gotten so much bigger than that in a way. And like a lot of like almost every press I know is like offering special discounts, is promoting the Women in Translation. Like, how has that felt for you as the instigator of this to witness that?
It's honestly pretty amazing to see. I feel that most of the credit goes to the people who have been participating in Women in Translation Month more than me, for getting the word out. And definitely sort of this year I've seen a lot of people on Instagram, and I absolutely cannot take credit for that because I am terrible with Instagram. And it's sort of growing almost on its own at this point, which is very, very gratifying to see that it's taking on its own life. And the hope is that more readers will be exposed. That's so.
When you started it, what was the most surprising, like how surprised were you by the statistics, I guess?
I was pretty surprised. I honestly, when I first started looking at the numbers, I really thought that it was something in my reading, and I was sort of concerned by that. And then I realized that, okay, well, at least I don't have to be kind of upset with myself. It's something bigger. But on the other hand, it kept feeling like it's too big. And these days, where even as things are improving, I'm constantly finding new areas where things aren't necessarily improving.
Yeah.
As uncomfortable as it is to sort of say that, one of the things that I started doing this year, and I hope I'll still manage to squeeze in this month, is how things look in other languages, where there are all sorts of other problems and other imbalances. And it's disappointing, but there's a general positive trend, which is amazing. So.
Yeah. Tom, do you have a question? I feel like I'm talking over you.
Well, I'm used to that. But I was just curious about the preparation that goes into it as the month progresses, and it comes up and you have to just sort of hit the ground running because there's no like gradual, celebration. Sort of all happens all at once, and what you do to prepare for that, and what it's become since the beginning.
Well, there's a lot of stuff in advance in terms of kind of preparing the list, for instance, of newly released books by women in translation, which I started doing last year. That's all kind of earlier. Seeing people start posting typically a few weeks before. So there's like a little bit of action, and then it just kind of builds. And again, what's wonderful is that it kind of happens regardless anything I do these days, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be very encouraging. One question, like, so we have like the 3% website was named after the infamous statistic that 3% of all books translated or published in America are in translation. Is there a statistic like that you, I mean, I guess you wouldn't want to use a statistic like that for Women in Translation Month because you want it to improve, but is there like a go-to number that you use to put this into perspective for people who aren't in the industry, aren't aware, don't pay attention to that? Is there a number that you refer to frequently?
I don't. It's a hard question because I feel that the 3% problem is the first thing that you need to be able to discuss with people, because usually they don't even think about the fact that they hardly read literature in translation at all. And then when they do, they're like, oh, and really, I have only sort of read men.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's this two-tiered problem. I mean, honestly, I usually say something like less than a third. So you could call it the 1% problem. But
Fair.
That sounds like it's talking in the other direction. So,
It's funny. I'm looking at like the first info or graph they put up this month for this, and I didn't put the percentages of what of women in translation that are on this graph. Instead, I put like the gap between them. So the gap was oh shoot, I don't know what I just did. I just like open up. Okay, so in 2008, the gap between books written by men and translated in English and written by women and translated in English was 54.61%, which is insane. It looks like on that particular year, there were just over 20% of the books translated were by women, and the best year to date was last year, in which, this year, but I don't think that this year's numbers are accurate yet, so I'm not counting them, in which it was just about 33% were by women and 62% were by men. And then there's a bunch that are both, that are anthologies that are included in here. So
it's I mean, getting to a third feels like a really positive thing, but it's still a third. And the problem also that I found is that anthologies are often not particularly well balanced. They're either only women or sort of generic and then very heavily men dominated, which is a shame. But things are improving.
I have a problem with the database with that, because if we only have male, female, both, or like something like an other category in case there's like a reason for that. But like the anthologies, because if even they have one female writer and 12 males, I end up putting it in as both, because it's not exclusively one or the other, but it doesn't really capture the granularity of that discrepancy at all.
Yeah, it was one of those things that in the first year I kind of thought, okay, maybe this will be a good opportunity. People were recommending all sorts of anthologies to check out, and kind of, you're looking for more women writers in translation. You're just not looking hard enough. Check out, anthologies. And then I come and I'm like, it's like 15%.
Yeah.
What? And so it's hopefully gonna get better.
Yeah. So one thing that you're doing, like I have a couple games for you guys, which probably won't end up being very positive. But to be positive, to be positive, I don't know how to lead this into a question. Do you want to talk about the 100 best women in translation list that you're compiling?
Yes. So it kind of came up a year ago with the 100 best books by writers in translation, or I don't remember what the exact title of the book is. That was going around Twitter.
Book, right?
Yeah, exactly. And someone basically sent me a message being like, "Hey, did you know that there are 9 books by women writers out of this 100?" And I was like, well, I haven't read the book. I haven't kind of encountered it, but that sounds about right in the most depressing way possible. And at the time, people started saying, oh, maybe we should make our own list, and kind of I started thinking about this concept, and I realized that if I were to try to make some sort of list by myself, I would not be able to, because I'm just one person. I didn't study literature. I don't have a good grasp of the canon, so to speak. And kind of a few months ago, I started thinking that it would be a very cool project to have a crowdsourced list, to basically see what people around the world think of when they think about women writers in translation. Who are the ones that they put forward first? And so for the past month and a half or so, I've been getting everyone's sort of 10 picks for the list. I was really worried that we wouldn't even reach 100 nominated titles. It's currently sitting at 651 titles. So that was not a problem. There's over 1,000 votes. In the end, there's going to be a list here, which I can't even influence very much. I kind of put a category of, if we don't reach 100, I get to pick the rest.
Right.
That's not relevant anymore.
Yeah.
And the idea is kind of to have a new canon. If until now we've had best, 100 novels of all time, the best 100 books, the best 100 books in translation, and women writers have always been on the sidelines, and women writers in translation have basically always been written out. So this is a chance to have a list that's dedicated to everything that we've kind of forgotten, and it's ended up being a very contemporary list, but it's still an indication of where we're going, and I have a lot I can say about the list.
Go for it. So I know that it doesn't, like, the nominations close on August 25th. So we're recording this on the 22nd. There's still a few days. And this will be up on the 22nd. So if you're listening to this podcast before the 25th, you can still get in and make your recommendations by either DMing, PMing, emailing, commenting on, doing whatever you want to do to get information to at read_WIT or at Bibli. I don't know how to pronounce your Twitter handle, but BIBLIBIO, or at read WIT on Instagram. How do you pronounce your Twitter handle?
Biblibio? I was thinking like life books. I was very young when I came up with that name.
I was to say Biblibio.
That's a common one. I really did not think the name thing very well.
It's fair. We name everything after numbers, so I'm not one to criticize anyone's Twitter handles by any means. What else do you think what else do you want to do, or do you think people should do to be able to start to improve the gap or fix this problem of women in translation? Because it is huge.
Wait, I'm very curious about what these other areas were that you said where things are not improving.
So one of the things that I started looking at this year, until now, I have long basically adored the translation database, because I am a numbers geek and I love the fact that there's a database that I can access and play around with and look at kind of all of the different parameters. But I realized this year that I also wanted to look at other genres, and I really wanted to see what was going on in nonfiction specifically. And this is probably a side effect of starting a PhD and being exposed to sort of a lot more nonfiction in my day-to-day life.
Yeah.
But I kind of just started I cherry-picked a few publishers to look at, and in nonfiction and sort of academic publishers and university presses, things like that, the situation is actually a lot worse than in fiction, which makes some sense, because in general, nonfiction has a bias, and when you add to it the extra kind of translation bias, it ends up being pretty bad. Mm-hmm. And there's also questions, I think, in other languages, which is people have always asked, well, how can you talk about translations when what counts is the original language? If there's bias in the original language, then obviously you're going to have bias in translation, which I don't believe that is correct. But beyond that, I did want to start looking at what was going on in other languages. And since I am bilingual, I took advantage of that and started looking a little bit. And it's actually really interesting in how messy it is, that there are certain publishers who are very, very good, certain publishers who are not, which ones are the ones who get translated into other languages, from kind of the marketing perspective, and also discovering that books from English are overwhelmingly the ones translated into other languages.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a bit of a bummer.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is very true. So, I don't know, have either of you looked at the, or seen the post that I put up I don't know when it was, last week? I don't know, somewhere this week, last week, that's about women in translation by country?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just looking at that yesterday.
Tom, you haven't seen this, right? Because this is inspired by you.
Oh, God. Okay.
So I asked you last time we did a podcast to give me some like statistics to look up. One quick thing, when you refer to the nonfiction stuff, so we were tracking nonfiction in the database, but it's super incomplete. And one thing that I am going to do this fall, God help me, is one of my interns went through and identified 2 inches worth of double-sided paper of nonfiction titles to add to the database. So yeah, as soon as that all gets added, there'll be like a little bit more, I'll feel a little bit more secure in sharing that information like publicly instead of it just existing. Cause I had never tracked it. And so I had someone go back to 2008 and help me like fill in the gaps, but it requires me to do a lot of data entry, and I haven't gotten to it yet. But so Tom, when we were talking, you said like one thing you'd be interested in is which countries have more or are doing better with books translated from that country by women versus by men. And so I went through the database for fiction and poetry only. I left out all the nonfiction stuff and children's books, and took the top 16 countries, which are the only 16 countries that had more than 100 books in the database. So at least it eliminates like the crazy small sample size of like Latvia has like 5 books by women and 3 by men, and that doesn't really indicate anything. It's just that nobody's reading books from Latvian, like whatever. So it's a little bit more useful. What country do you think had the highest percentage of books by women in translation out of the 14 or 16 ones that are the most translated?
So I know the answer to this.
I know you do. Tom?
And we're going by individual book?
Yes.
What country has the highest?
I'll tell you, it's not France.
I don't. I think I'm guessing that there's probably something skewed with like Brazil or something.
Brazil is not even on here. No, they are. I'm sorry. They're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th. They're 10th.
10th.
They have 75 books from by males, 32 by females.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So the first one has got to be a couple hundred books, huh?
No. It's not. It's percentage, not total number.
Oh, percentage. Got it. I really have no idea. If it's not, I would guess Germany, but that's not really based on anything.
Germany's fifth. 284 male, 185 female. There is no country that has more books by women than men, which is not shocking but annoying, I suppose. The number one, do you want to say what it is?
So I remember looking this up the first year, and I was shocked.
It's wild. It's super wild. It's not even a country that you would think of, because it's a country that doesn't speak another language primarily. Yeah. It's Canada. Which I guess makes some sense because so many Quebec writers that get translated are female. And I've always, like, every time that I've read books from Canada or paid attention to, like, Quebec writers, they tend to be female. So that makes sense. But there's 66 books by men, 56 by women. Number 2 is Sweden, which I also would have expected. I thought Sweden or Norway. Norway, I don't think qualified because they're just under 100. Oh, no, they do. They're
low.
They're low. I thought they would be higher, but then again, they have like, 6 Knausgaard books or 7. So they everything gets skewed when you have one author that has like a ton of books. But Sweden, it goes Canada, Sweden, Denmark, Korea, Germany, Argentina, Mexico, Israel, France, Brazil, Norway, Spain, Japan, Russia, Italy, and China. So interesting.
What's super interesting for me is that it was this kind of, I remember Israel was what tilted it for me, since I'm familiar with the book market here. And I remember that first year looking at the statistics, I was like, okay, but like, I know that here we have in fiction at least, certain publishers, by far majority of women writers. And then I come and I look at the translations, and I was shocked that it wasn't translating into English. And then looking at these countries and looking at the different languages, it kind of makes some weird degree of sense. I mean, even Korea, everyone talks about how much women have been dominating the literary scene, and it's still not enough.
Right. Yeah. And that is surprising, because it is like, I don't know, aside from oh God, what's his name? Young Yoon Moon? No, that's wrong. It's something like that. But aside from like there's like one major writer that I know of that's contemporary male writer from Korea that I really like. Most of the people that get talked about are all female from Korea.
Right.
And yet it's still like in the background, like subtly, people are still publishing like 60% books by men. The numbers on this are fucked up too. So like when you add them all together, it ends up being that 30 out of the top 16 languages. I keep saying 14 because there's 14 publishers, which is what we're going to do next. But out of this top 16 languages, if you add up the male books by men and books by women make up 32% of that. So out of the almost 4,000 books that are in the database from these top 16 countries, only 1,250 are written by women, which, given that like those countries are the ones that we most frequently see, like there are countries that aren't on this list, obviously, but most of the countries that we talk about the books from, or that we think about or just come across in bookstores, are from one of these 16 countries, and they're predominantly written by men.
Yeah, and also I think that it counters one of the early arguments of, oh, well, maybe the problem is, sexist societies and sort of those other countries, which is a bit of a problematically racist claim. And then you come and say, really, Norway, that bastion of chauvinism, like, what? And sort of having to balance the expectation of what we think of as countries that don't give voice to women, and realizing, hey, France, not great.
France is the one that stands out the most to me, actually.
Yeah.
only because, I mean, 30% of the books are by women, but like the discrepancy in raw numbers is so staggering. So it's 476 books by men, 210 by women. Like when you put it into a column chart, it looks absurd. Like it looks ridiculous. Like how many more books there are from France, and like that they're predominantly by men.
Yeah. No, I would be really interested to see how the full chart, I tried to do this back in the day and I got swamped with it, but how it looks with languages, where the effect of Quebec on the one hand, but it sort of the documented lack of women writers, or not lack, but less amount of women writers from Africa writing in French, that it's been very difficult to find.
Yeah, if you do you use? God, this is in the weeds, but I'm going to do this anyways. Do you use FileMaker Pro by any chance?
No.
Okay, so do you just use Excel spreadsheets when you figure this out?
Yeah.
If I email you something, the best way to do all of this is to upload all the data from the database into FileMaker Pro, and I have a template that you can just take whatever you want and put in there, and it has all these pre-manufactured scripts that will that I've designed over the past 12 years that will sort things into whatever category you want. So like putting this stuff together is super, super, super fast. Yeah, I don't know. I keep meaning to like make a I don't know what you would call it, like a tutorial on how to use this in a way that will like be quicker for everyone. Because I know how to do it, but I always assume everyone else knows how to do it, but I don't think that's true. But if I share this like, with whomever, with you, with anyone who's listening who wants this, like there's a very quick way that you can upload all the information into a database that then you can just do finds and searches and run scripts really quickly that will give you like whatever information you want. So I will make your year easier next year. I promise.
Oh, all right. Well,
so yeah,
I might adopt some of those.
It's really powerful, and once you know how to do it, it's crazy because you can do anything. Yeah, you can do anything. So like, it takes me like 15 minutes to run like all these things and put this all together, which makes me feel super lazy in that I don't run more of them or figure out more of them. But the other one that you talked about, Tom, and this one is a game for you guys, which is very wild, is the publishers, and which publishers are doing better or worse with women in translation. So I know that in the past you've run statistics by like, it's essentially like by year, usually. Yeah. Okay, so I did this from the beginning of 2008, like everything that's in the database. And I found the top 14 presses, which are every press that had more than 70 books in the database, which seemed, again, to eliminate small sample problems, feels fair enough. Okay, so there are 14 publishers that end up on this list. There is one publisher who does more books by women than by men in translation. And which publisher is that?
What was the criteria again? How many books published?
Yep, it's 70, more than 70.
More than 70 over the last
11 years.
11 years.
I think it's 12 now.
Seven or 8 a year.
Yep.
The question that I have is, I know which publisher in the past 5 or 6 years has risen to the top of the list. Yep. The question is, I don't know what their stats were beforehand, and if that changes things.
Interesting. So, the press that's in first has only been around for 5 or 6 years.
So my guess is Amazon Crossing.
Yes.
That was my guess too.
Amazon Crossing has 60% books by women in translation, 40% by men.
Yeah.
And they are the only one above 50%. And then the drop-off is pretty significant. The second place press, if you're going to rank these by places, is at 38% books by women. And who do you think that is? This one is interesting.
How many have Open Letter published?
We are fourth.
You're fourth.
Okay. We're just above 30%, which is funny. We're just above 30%, but when I do this next year, it'll be crazy because of the first 6 books that we're publishing in 2020, 5 of them are by women, and I think of the all 10 that we're publishing in 2020, 8 are by women, but it depends on where those last ones fall, because our catalog overlaps 2020 and 2021. So depending on like which ones end up in 2020 and which ones end up in 2021, it might be 8 or it might be 7, but it's a significant amount. Like we have a shitload of books in a row that are by women, like one after another, which is great.
I noticed that this year that it was sort of the first time there was like a few years of kind of hovering just under the 50%, and then this year was like the first time that it went over.
Also, most of our books don't count on this, or most of our books by women don't count on this chart because they're nonfiction books by Dubravka Igrashik. So
I count them.
Yeah, out of the 6 books that we published by her, only one of them is included in this total. Which, whatever. That's the nature of setting this up. Do you guys have any guesses as to who else is Amazon Crossing, 2 presses, then Open Letter, and then a bunch of things that are not surprising but are going to shock you a little bit?
I mean, I have a guess for the lower end.
Okay, what's the lower end?
I'm pretty sure the low end is going to be the publisher that in 2014 published 42 books, of which one was an anthology with men and women, and the rest were by men.
They are not the lowest.
No. Oh boy.
Two qualifications to that. So you're talking about Delkey Archive, who is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th out of 14. They one
Really?
thing that is worth pointing out on here is that I'm only counting the books that are new. So if you're reissuing books by women that have already been in print, they're not counting. So
Okay.
one press that's below them that will maybe be surprising, but I've known this for a while, is New York Review Books.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They're low.
They're very low.
Yeah.
They're below
It's-
Delkey. They're 11th. Or they're 10th.
I think I don't think of it as much because numerically it's not as many books. It doesn't feel as shocking, but that makes sense
Right.
True.
percentage wise.
So where is New Directions on this list?
Dead middle. Just
Dead-
barely above Penguin, barely above Delkey.
Well, New Directions had a really huge shift this past year.
A lot of reissues
Where
though too.
They with the reissues, but and overall of sort of the broader category, like my more generous, I guess, or not necessarily more generous because the nonfiction makes it worse, but the generic-y list, they really went from kind of last year I'd had them at 30%, and then this year it was 50, solid 50, like literally 50%. And that was kind of, I'm really curious to see if that's something that's going to stick. I'm hopeful.
Hey Tom, you will be able to guess. Okay, so the bottom three are the bottom four. So after there's bottom four, and then there's New York Review Books, and Delkey, then Penguin, then New Directions. That bottom four, there's one of them that I know you would guess.
Well, I'm pretty sure that what are we including here? Knopf, FSG.
Knopf and FSG are two of the lowest.
Yeah, and then
I would guess Yale University Press.
They don't have enough books.
yeah,
Okay.
that's the issue. Riverhead.
Didn't have enough books.
Oh, this is tough.
These are one of them is super obvious. One of them you'll never guess. The lowest one is Pushkin. Of the books that they distribute here in the U.S., only 12% are by women.
Oh, I wouldn't have thought they had enough because they hadn't been really readily available.
They were the lowest. They were the last people in. I wasn't going to include them, but they were like at 70 books. So I was like, oh, fuck. Like I need a clear cutoff, and 70 seems legitimate. So I included them, and they look terrible. So poor Pushkin, I'm sorry. Knopf is the next lowest, obviously. And then there's a press that is like one of the most prestigious presses of international literature in existence. And they are very low.
I'm unsure how you mean prestigious.
Oh,
press.
There's no question.
I mean, I know that I'm trying to look at my shelf.
Yes, Archipelago.
Oh,
16%.
Yeah.
Of the books in the database, they have 89 books. 15 are by women. 74 are by men.
That's somehow not shocking. I mean, I feel like every time we look through the catalog or get galleys, it's like here's another guy from Norway or something.
Yep. So
they're really interesting because they have some of my favorite kind of books by women writers from the past few years, or books that have been so special and so different. And it's such a low percentage. And this year also, I looked at the children's imprint, and it's like 0% women.
Yep. Yeah. I didn't even include that, but yeah, it's very true.
I don't know how a children's literature imprint can be 0% women writers, but apparently it's possible.
So at the upper end, the positive end, after Amazon is Other Press, Europa, Open Letter, Seagull Books, Minotaur, New Directions. So that's your top 6, 7.
Those are the sort of 30s range.
Yep.
I would imagine.
Everything's in the 30s. So when I did this by the top 16 languages and the top 14 publishers, the percentage of like total, when you add them all together, the percentage of books by women is basically 32% for both of those. So like even if it ends up being different overall, when you look at the whole database, the people who are doing the most and the countries that are having the most books translated are like a 68% male or 65% male, 32% female, and then a couple books that are, mixed.
Yeah.
Wait, can you say again who it was, the top 5 or whatever?
Yeah, the top 5 is Amazon Crossing, Other Press, Europa Editions, Open Letter, Seagull.
Seagull. Okay.
And then Minotaur is right after that because I forget who it is, but Minotaur has like one of these female crime writers that they do a bunch of books by, so it ends up sort of skewing their numbers in a positive way.
Yeah, that's something I would love to see if normalized for certain authors, like
I was going to do
Europa
that next.
editions.
Yep.
How much of that is Elena Ferrante?
And Penguin
And,
is
like,
all jacked up, and Italy's all jacked up because of Andrea Camarelli or whatever his name is, that has like 75 books in translation.
Yeah.
So he just like fucks up the percentages, but it's like one dude writing a bunch of terrible mysteries. No offense to, he's dead, so who cares? But like I'm never gonna read those books, and like they make the percentages all wacky. So like I was gonna do it by author too next week. And the other thing I was going to do, and this is going to be a testament to you, is I was going to break down 2008 through 2013 and 2014 through 2019 and see if there's a difference based on when Women in Translation Month started.
Well, that would be amazing to see. I'm really hopeful that it's an improvement.
I think it is. If you look at the overall trend lines, it is, no matter what. So like I think it's going to be a self-fulfilling situation, but that's okay. Like I would like to see like what the how stark that difference is.
I definitely think there's been this increase just in the past few years, and I didn't ever track enough kind of the 2008 range.
Right. Yeah.
I was in high school.
Oh my God. You were.
But
don't say things like that.
That was when I started my blog. As I said, I chose the name very poorly as a teenager who had no idea what she was doing. Didn't quite think of those things. But
in 2008, I was already like drawing on my retirement fund and getting divorced. Like literally. This is like not even a joke. Oh man. So, but to be positive again, what do you recommend? Let's recommend some books. I know we did this last time that we were on the podcast, but you weren't on here, so like, why don't you recommend a few things that people should check out?
Ooh, I feel like every time someone asks me that, either I forget every book I've ever read, or I just end up recommending the exact same books every time. Which is not to say that there aren't many really good books. It's just that I'm like thinking of the same ones because kind of comes all at the same time. I did just read the last book that I finished is poetry by Toyo Shibata. Basically, she started writing at like age 92, and poems are all about like I read them in Hebrew, translated into Hebrew. So I don't know what the book is called in English, but I'm pretty sure it's been translated into English. And it's all these poems about like looking forward to waking up every morning and sort of what life looks like in your mid to late 90s, which was just incredible. So that was pretty cool if someone can track that down, what that is in English. Trying to think other perpetual recommendations is Scholastic Kasonga's Cockroaches, which is one of my favorite books. If we're talking about Archipelago kind of having this
funny.
This incredible backlog of women writers, just not enough. That's one of my favorites. Trying to think. Good ones. I mean, a classic is also, I read The Second Sex this year.
Oh, yeah.
Which I had never read. And I think that pretty much everyone should probably give it a chance. Necessary reading.
Oh, for sure. Hey, Tom, do you have anything that you want to add of like new books that you might have thought of since our last conversation? Because I have one.
I cannot, because I got on a plane and read a book in translation, but by a man who's dead, published by New York Review of Books.
That's no good.
Worse.
Which book was it? Oh, the Manchet book.
Yeah, the new Manchet, or whatever, the newly translated Manchet.
Yeah.
And then I read 2 nonfiction books not in translation. So I'm not really here to help with this list.
Have you gotten the new Despentes galley?
Yeah, we've had it for a while.
Oh, you have? Because like nobody I know else has it. Like I keep asking people, and they're like, "No, I haven't received it." And the book comes out in November, and like we just got it last week. But I'm about halfway through, and I really like that. And I don't think we mentioned that on our last podcast. But
yeah, I don't know. I've also had a copy of the British edition for like 8 months. So. And it's the exact same translation. They didn't change anything.
They didn't change a word. Like it does look like some of the Britishisms are gone, though.
I wonder if we got an advanced. The galley we had seemed to have a lot of Britishisms in it, and I'm wondering if they're going to address that. I really hope they do.
Yeah, there are no British spellings in the version I have.
Okay, but what about British words?
Nothing that I can pick up on that I can remember at this moment in time. But like, I don't have it in front of me. But there's nothing, usually I'm pretty sensitive to that. So if there was a lot, it would stand out. So I don't remember that. But I'm going to London next month, and I'm going to buy volume 2, which is already out there. I don't understand why they're taking so long to do this, FSG. And I also feel like it's like flying under the radar in a weird way.
Well, part of it, I mean, do you want the whole story? It seems to me that there was a situation like with Javier Marias where somebody involved in this wanted more success than they were having at the small press, i.e. the feminist press.
Right.
And wanted to move to a bigger house, but that turned out to be a trickier sell than they thought, whoever controlled the rights. So it took them a while to find an American publisher. And I could be wrong about this, but I think, who is it that has the British rights?
Macklehouse, yeah.
They probably, of course, get involved and sort of screw things up for the English market as well, and all of that sort of stuff. So I think it just tried
to fuck us once too. So
yeah, it just got sort of muddy, is kind of the issue, and so it just took some time, frankly.
There was this is I'll distract from you're possibly giving away information that you shouldn't be giving away publicly by giving away information that I shouldn't be giving away publicly, is that Macklehouse is the big problem we had with them was related to Maidenhair and the Shishkin book. And Shishkin has a new book out, and I asked him about it because it's a nonfiction book about Joyce and Robert Valser and someone else and whatever. And so I asked him about it, and he's publishing it on his own, with his own publishing house and his own publishing house that's translating it into English and publishing it in Switzerland. Which seems like a horribly bad idea.
Yeah. That's weird.
Yep. So like he didn't. I don't think he liked working with Macklehouse at all. And he has that book of short stories with Deep Vellum and Maidenhair, which is the only book of his that did very well. And then when we try to do the next things, he's like, nope. It's like, I've got this. I'll just do it on my own. Also, we're getting off into male writers, but I'm gonna buy the second volume to the Despentes when I'm in London, because it's been out there. It was out there last year, I guess.
Yeah. So are you enjoying it?
I am enjoying it. I am fascinated. This is giving away what I probably will end up writing about next week, or next Monday or Tuesday, whenever the blog post comes out. But there's a scene early on in which a new character is introduced, and they are in a grocery store, and all they want to do is shoot and kill everyone, and they hate like Muslims. They hate it's like a pure right-wingy sort of like thing, and it's clearly like, you know, she doesn't support or you know, promote that viewpoint, and like the person is undercut as a character very quickly on, and like that it's not like this book is advocating gun violence. But I read this and I texted you, and I read it, I hit it, and I was like, man, if this were like a movie, this would be shelved. Like there's and it's interesting, like the difference between like how the medium of writing with something like this, it might just be that the medium of writing allows you more nuance and more ways of addressing that, and it's not as like viscerally triggering, I guess, to most people. But if this were a movie, there's no way this would come out right now.
Wait, you're aware that a movie just gets shelved, right?
What's that?
Are you aware that a movie just got shelved?
Yes, that's why I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
Okay. I thought about that too. And then I hate to be like this, Chad, and you can, advance that literature is more subtle and more capable of addressing these things. It comes down to fucking numbers, man. Like,
Yep.
we'll be lucky if 20,000 people read Despentes' book.
There's no way 20,000 people are going to read this.
Compared to the millions of people that might have seen this movie.
Yep.
So,
well, also the visual medium kind of, I feel...
tracks a sort of, it's an easy access point compared to a book, right?
Yeah, it's also more direct. It really is more parallel to what you see when in experience and reality versus a book, which kind of is still separated to a certain degree.
Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All those things are the things I was thinking about. And then I was thinking that like what's great about this, what I like about her book and like about this and her generally is that most of the people in it are fuck ups and are assholes, and that you and like there is so much better characterization. They're like she's like woke in a weird way. Like she's woke in a way that's not like proclaiming it, but like showing people who are like aware of all of the flaws of society and themselves, which makes it a much stronger book. And I like that. And I think that's what appeals to me. So I was going to use that as like the entryway into like why I think her characterization is so interesting.
Oh yeah, it's really good. I think there's, I mean, I feel like she's been doing that since Apocalypse Baby, where like,
which I don't remember at all.
Oh, I think about that book all the time. Everyone in the book is just sort of crushed by society and capitalism and just sort of really struggling to sort of make their way through it, and doing so in a lot of different ways that all sort of collide, because that's what society is, right? Yeah, and she's very good at like portraying all of that, like very intimately, and then zooming out and putting it all back together.
Yeah, and this one has people who are actually very successful too, so it's like a little bit different than
Apocalypse Baby had that to a certain degree too. That's what I mean. Like, I think there's a lot of, but they of course have their problems too, right?
Yes,
so,
yeah.
And that's the thing.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that they're also like flawed in interesting ways, and in ways that are like I don't know. I think the characterization is great, and like that specific scene sort of opened it up of like that there's a way that she can present that isn't this knee-jerky reaction that we have when we see it on film, or because there's so many people who see it, or because it's or whatever it is. Like there's a difference there, and I like that. I appreciate her quite a bit.
I haven't had a chance to read her yet.
It's curious, because I think what we're saying, like the 20,000 people reading it seems like a high watermark, but also like the idea that like a big press might be not super enthused about publishing her doesn't surprise me, because she is sort of like divisive, but I'm not entirely sure why she's divisive. I just can feel it.
I think there's a little bit of, I mean, I don't know that's, I don't feel that she's a divisive author to read. I think what her personality kind of bothers people. And she's been, to be completely fair, sort of a flake about touring in the U.S. And so, not that she just like flat out refuses, but like has committed to doing it and then backed out several times. And if you're going to put big publisher sort of money towards something, you kind of need them to do the requisite sort of amount of appearances, or even if it's just sitting down for an interview that appears in the Parish Review blog or something, and she's just been sort of, unwilling to do that. And that's fine. I don't think it matters in the grand scheme of things, but yeah, I can see why a publisher might balk a little bit about paying for a 3-volume, work, and then feel like they're doing all the work for publicity themselves.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, I need to get going, you two. So
yeah, I do too. So, Meytal, thank you for joining us and for talking about all of this. I'll leave with one question. Is there any statistic or information you would like about Women in Translation Month that we have not looked into yet, or that you wish someone would look into?
There are all sorts of, I would love to see more kind of worldwide statistics, and I'm going to be hopefully putting some stuff out on that myself, but I would love to see kind of a big worldwide collaborative effort from all sorts of different countries, and to be able to start figuring out what stage it is where it is that we get lost.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Where that happens, but that's a big thing to ask.
That'd be great though. Well, thank you again for joining us. This is really fun talking to you. And
Thank you for having me.
I look forward to seeing the list of the 100 women too.
I really look forward to sharing it. There are all sorts of super interesting things that exist both in the list itself and in the process, and it's really exciting.
Very cool. Okay, well, I'll talk to you soon, and I'll talk to you soon too, Tom.
All right. Thank you both.
Bye.